In this case now, we're talking about the courts. We're looking at, a lot of people have talked about there are likely to be a lot of cases, one beginning from the Election Petition Tribunal. Because the High Court has said go back to the Petition Tribunal to look at this case particularly. But do you also see some other cases coming up concurrently with this election matter, in such a case that we need to clarify an issue of candidature? Was he properly nominated? As the law says, a man cannot be said to be properly nominated unless he nominates a running mate. In this case, he and his running mate are having issues. The running mate says, I'm not running with you, but I'm the governor-elect. But what kind of cases do you see coming up in the future around this whole area?
Right. I do not think in the circumstance, if PDP will have to go to court, that they would necessarily have to go to the Federal High Court to ask for interpretation, because entering into an election without a running mate, goes to the root of validity, whether someone is qualified at that time. And that has been covered by the provision of Section 138, sub 1A, that at the time somebody was elected as a winner, whether he was qualified. And that qualification can be given an expanded interpretation. And then if you cannot sustain that argument, then you have a subsection, that is 138 section 138 subsection 1B, non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act can also be a good ground for you to make your argument that at the time this election was conducted, the strict provision of the Electoral Act was not complied with, that the candidate entered into that election without his running mate. So I do not think that there is any other venue in ventilating this matter other than the Election Tribunal. It's covered. The grounds are covered by the Electoral Act, and the Election Tribunal is the venue to have all of that. And the only person that can challenge that in the circumstance is PDP. James Faleke cannot come to Election Petition Tribunal anymore. So if James Faleke wants to continue or sustain his claim and campaign, then he will. The option available to him now is to appeal against the decision of the Federal High Court that declined jurisdiction to interpret what he asked the Federal High Court to interpret, which is that it is a joint ticket. And since it is a joint ticket, the death of Audu by law meant that he should take over.
It looks like we're going back to what we've seen before during the days of our late President Yaradua. Recall, we're talking about written, or not, whether a verbal communication by the president then would suffice when we were talking about handing over to the then Vice President Goodluck Jonathan. Now, looking at the Electoral Act, I still have to go back there. It's written expressly that you have to write to show your withdrawal. And so far, it hasn't been proven that he's done that. But if it's been on the news, been in the news before that particular election, that he was withdrawing, he wasn't going to be part of that particular election, meaning that Mr. Yahya Bello never had a running mate. Can we go back, looking at how we were in a dilemma at that point in time, talking about written communication versus a verbal communication, or a communication seen online or in a news space? Would that also mean that Mr. Faleke actually withdrew his candidacy?
Yeah, if the Electoral Act states that you will have to write, then I do not think that speaking orally or communicating to another person will suffice, will fulfill the condition of the Electoral Act. You have to write. And then in writing, you don't speak in an unambiguous terms. You have to state it expressly that you're withdrawing. Now, if James Faleke actually wrote and indicated that he was withdrawing, I'm afraid it was a plan, something to give an upper court to Mr. Bello, because if that has happened, Mr. Bello can sustain his victory at the election.
Let's start looking at some possibilities here in law. Let's say before the day runs out, it's proven that he actually wrote his political party, writing a petition and following up with that petition saying, if you're not going to look at my petition, making me the flag bearer of my political party, I'm withdrawing and backing out of this race. If that communication sufficed pretty much later, you say that will put a dent on the victory of Mr. Yahya Bello?
It will put a very strong dent to the victory of Yahya Bello. And as a matter of fact, it's like a walk for PDP because all he needs to do when he files his petition is to challenge victory of Yahaya Bello, the ground that Yahaya Bello and PDP did not comply with the conditions of the Electoral Act, and the election tribunal will have to cancel the election in the circumstance. The other thing that may happen is whether if they cancel the election, they will give effect to the provision of Section 140 sub 2, which states that where you find someone disqualified, then you shall not declare someone who scored the second highest vote as a winner, but you will order a fresh election. Whether the election petition tribunal will do that or the election tribunal will interpret it that in the circumstance, Mr. Wada is the winner of the election. It's a serious dent, if it has happened, it's a serious dent on the victory of Yahaya Bello.
All right, Mr. Daniel, some have said that the APC should not at any point in time have substituted Abubakar Audu with Yahaya Bello.